welcome everybody. I'd like to begin by saying thank you to all of our guests who have joined us here today. Feel free to let us know. You can type in the chat bar. We'll keep your microphones and we'll keep your cameras off just to avoid, a lot of the interwebs problems and connections you may have, but to keep the feedback down in the background as well. So we'll take questions as we go through. You can feel free to type those as the speakers are presenting, and then when we come to the break, we will read them. So don't think you have to wait to type in your questions down there. We can scroll back up and see them all. So I want to welcome today our three fabulous presenters. First, I'll let you know we have Paul Jarzembowski on our webinar again today. Paul and I he is from the USCCB and I am from the Loyola University, and we co-host these webinars. So Paul Jarzembowski works for the United States Catholic Conference of Bishops as the Assistant Director for Youth Young Adult Ministries and the Secretariat of Laity, Marriage, Family Life, and Youth. Paul also serves as the staff liaison for the USCCB National Advisory Team on Young Adult Ministry and is the United States National Coordinator for World Youth Day, which was a little over a month ago. And I am Tracy Lamont. I'm your moderator today. I'm the Assistant Professor of Religious Education at the Loyola Institute for Ministry at Loyola University, New Orleans. And I am also a member, actually everyone on the call today is a member of the USCCB National Advisory Team on Young Adult Ministry. So today we're very, very grateful, and we welcome our first speaker today is going to be Patrick Rivera. Wave, Patrick. He's the director of the Office of Young Adult Ministry in the Diocese of San Diego. He was born in California and raised in Tennessee and studied in New Jersey at Seton Hall University, where he was also a seminarian for the Diocese of Nashville. And he's worked with the Diocese of San Diego since 2015 and has been involved in young adult ministry for, I think it was 15 years, I counted.
That's correct.
That sounds good. So welcome, Patrick. Our second presenter today, we have Sean Allen. Wave, Sean. Sean is the Director of Young Adult and Campus Ministry for the Diocese of Fort Wayne, South Bend in Indiana. After working for a decade as an electrical engineer, he discerned a call to lay ministry and earned a Master's of Divinity degree from the University of Notre Dame. Afterwards, Sean split his time between working for a large parish and for the diocese, both directing young adult ministry, which he did for 9 years before transitioning full-time with the diocese about 2 years ago. And then third, we have the wonderful Diana Hencherenko. Wave, Diana. Diana is the young adult minister at St. Angelo and Ricci Parish in Youngstown, Ohio, where she has been serving for the last 3.5 years. She earned a master's degree in pastoral studies from LIM, our lovely university here, in 2011, and has worked in parish young adult ministry and evangelization for the past 10 years. So welcome, a huge, huge welcome to all three of you. And thank you again for everyone who has joined us today. So today we're going to start off with some reflections from our speakers. We're talking about disrupting ministry, bringing the Synod on young people to life. And so our first webinar in our series of webinars that we've been starting for young adult ministry really tackled the Synod itself, really broke open. We had several auditors that attended the Synod, and they broke open their experience of being a synodal church, about what it was like to have young adults be present in such a vast form in Rome in October. And it was really a tremendous process of listening and accompaniment. And from that came the final Synod document, which came out not too long ago. And so we hosted our second webinar, and it was just last week, on whether or not the final Synod document was in fact a paradigm shift. And so to those, just to let you all know, if you have the registration link, we'll put it back up here again. If you put your name in the registration link for the webinars, we'll always email out the recordings of these webinars. So if you missed the last two, we're happy to send the link to you. Just let us know. Just fill out that registration. So last week we talked about, we broke open the final Synod document, and we talked very deeply about, whether or not it was a paradigm shift. And in many ways, in talking about young adult ministry and in ministry in general, we talk about ministry to young adults. And the final Synod document was calling deeply for reevaluation of that, to be ministry with young adults, to accompany young adults, to be a listening church, and to go out into the margins and find where young people are. And so today we're going to start talking about some some sort of best practices, some strategies, ways that people in dioceses and in parishes are implementing the final synod document and the beauty of the synod process itself. So we're going to start with Patrick today, who is out in San Diego, and he's going to, Patrick, go ahead, take it away. What insights do you have for us?
Yeah, no, it's thank you very much, Tracy and Paul and everyone for joining us. You know, it's unique here in San Diego because this is not the first time we've actually taken a synod document or a synod and pushed it into actual diocesan ministry into a more applicable way. So I'll throw a few things out. When we really reconstructed our office, the main sort of vision we had was to find ways to captivate and culture relationships with young adults that were already practicing the faith, because we recognize that that was kind of the most immediate crisis, right? Like, where are those young adults that we need to reach out and grab and feed back into parish life, and how do we do that? So that really structured the first 2 or 3 years of our outreach. But as that continued to grow, now, of course, the best part is from these leaders and from these young adults, we have this need of training and need of formation for them to say, like, well, how do I go out and fish? Like, how do I go and find those Catholics that are formerly practicing, that are nominal now, that are kind of fitting the mold as we see in young adulthood nowadays, where they're slowly detracting and pushing further and further away from the faith and falling into other areas of concern and instead of the faith. And so we were really encouraged to hear that there was going to be a synod on young people. We heard about that even when we were doing our own synod based upon the previous one, the one that was released. What was it, Amoris Laetitia? When that synod came around, we then followed up with a synod on our own after the apostolic exhortation. So I would say that synods have a way of creeping into our diocesan life here in San Diego. And so I would just say this. When we first read the document, the bishop had proposed that we read the findings from our pre-synodal document and then push that into us then reading the actual document itself, the final document that came out. We read that, and then he said the apostolic exhortation, as we have heard, will be coming out fairly soon. But before that, even, we're already taking the items and points from the synodal documents that have been released, the final document, and we're looking at them as to how they actually affect and play a role in ministry here in San Diego. And so through a series of meetings, we've come up with really 5 areas that we want to focus on before we even begin the synod. And the way we're going to do this is sort of to say, what are the strategies or ways in which we're disrupting things that are already going on? Is we're going to have town hall listening sessions for young adults only. So the way it works out is you have to be between the ages of 18 and 39. And we're going to have probably about a dozen of these across the diocese. And they're going to be 5 various areas that then have to be looked upon. So the first one, and this is what I would say, here's how we're really approaching it. We're approaching them with these 5 areas of the synod we've seen as they apply to us, but also through the lenses of our diocese. So the first is walking with God. And these are very general themes, but really this theme, I think, for us in San Diego is we want to identify what our young adults actually are doing that's focusing on their prayer life and their growth. Are they walking with God? Are they walking away from God? Where are they right now in their relationship with God? And then to go a little further down, the next session was walking with the church. So are they in the church? How can the church serve them? Is this church serving them? And what are they struggling with when it comes to the Catholic Church? And both of these themes, we're going to have the lenses of multicultural approach, life stages approach, which is a whole other conversation, marginalized approach, and the undocumented. So we want to be able to say, just as much as we push back and say, oh, so how are you walking with God? It's uniquely different to every person across the diocese. There's those that are undocumented. There's those that are struggling in this area or this capacity. And we want to be mindful of that there's going to be different lenses in which they view what it means to walk with God, to walk with the church. The third one is really designed more for pastors, shepherding. What are they doing to shepherd their young adults, and how can they improve their shepherding? And then the fourth one is considered the fishing. And this is really, once again, this goes back to the parishes to say, how are the parishes fishing for young adults? How are they actually going out and inviting them and finding the young adults who have walked away from ministry through junior high or high school, and how are they then bringing them back in? And then the last one is the vocation or calling. And that one is really going to be one where we're going to pull in not just seminarian, but at the same time, not just those that are considering the seminary, but also those that are married, those that are single, those that all have different vocations in life that are all within young adulthood. How can we reach out and bring them closer into a lifelong vocation with the church? Now, that's just kind of like the bird's eye big view of that. Each one of these 5 areas that we're really focusing on, that we're pushing to different regions and deaneries and the diocese to have these listening sessions, each one of these have many more areas. I mean, I'm looking at my notes and we have like the evangelical approach to scripture, or the continual approach that we see with young adulthoods, which is where science and the faith they can't work together. They're not actually conducive to each other. So how can we respond to that? So all of these have different approaches and different lenses in which we're viewing them. But we're going to take all this stuff, and then in October, we're going to come together and really push a full diocesan synod with delegates from every parish that are young adults. So that's kind of the bigger bird's eye view. What happens from that synod, we still don't know, but our hope is that it will really help us understand how we can better serve and how we can serve together in these areas that we see as big fish in the pond for us in San Diego. So there's a few stones I throw into the pond to see if I can make any ripples. That's what we're doing here.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Patrick. That's a very, I would almost use the word comprehensive, a very comprehensive approach to bringing the synod to life. And it sounds like you all have been working on it, like you said, for several years now. So that's amazing. And I particularly like how you're identifying first and foremost, where a young adult is in their relationship with God, to find that out first. We talked greatly about that in last week's webinar as well, is that's what accompaniment is. I think Brenda said, and I loved it so much, I'm going to repeat it again. I think she was the one that said last week, accompaniment isn't an email, like,
Yeah.
and so so the strategies that you put out there are showing this deep connection that you're all trying to make with the young people in your communities. That's beautiful, Patrick. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah,
Go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, one of the things that we really wanted to highlight in all of this, and it I think in a way it captures all of the different things, because there's young adults in our diocese who feel that the church needs to be stronger in their approach to the life issues, or to a stronger approach to the continual trends of sexuality and as a culture sees it, or it needs to be more persuasive in social justice issues. There's all these different things. And so what we really wanted to do was essentially highlight the importance of evaluating every personal relationship, or the personal relationships that young adults have with God, and to further explore how those can then feed back into the life of the church. It's not to say, like, let's try and identify the relationships that young adults have with the church and then feed it somehow into their spiritual growth with God. We want to go from what's their faith and what are their gifts with God, and then from them highlight that and push that. How does the church then feed them into lifelong mission? So
that's beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you.
Sean,
we're going to turn it over to you. Sean, tell us what your thoughts have been and your experience working with the Synod process and the Synod document in your area.
Great. Thanks, Tracy. So, Patrick, I think that was a great way of talking about sharing the fruits of the Synod among your own diocese, reaching out to the people, the young adults, the pastors. I'm going to talk about it, just a couple of things, very practical things about changes that can be made, like within the church, within our diocese, within our parishes, so that we're more able to receive and reach out to young adults, to be able to go outward. So the first I wanted to focus on was kind of comes from paragraph 141 in the document, where it talks about a need for a greater coordination and integration of ministry. This is kind of addressing the dreaded ministry silos that everyone talks about, that we shouldn't have, but we seem to have. And the paragraph talks about moving from working on offices to working on projects. So our diocese kind of started on a path towards this about a year ago, and more recently with the Synod and things have made some changes to adapt. So we reorganized to create a secretariat for evangelization and discipleship. And part of that was we no longer have or refer to things as offices. So we have ministries, we have projects that we're doing, and we operate as a team. Now within that, each person has their particular expertise in reaching a certain demographic or a certain type of ministry. So we recognize that and we still work in that. But it's allowed us to have a little more flexibility and an ability to work together. And so what this really came about as our bishop started considering reaching young adults as a priority for our diocese. And so that kind of filters down, well, what does that mean? If it's a priority, does that mean I get more ministry staff? Does that mean more funding? Is that, what does that equate to? So what it ultimately started equating to is it starts filtering down, like, all right, if this is a priority, what does this mean for our bishop? So this is a question I actually asked our bishop. What does this mean for you? Yeah. And that meant for him that one of our continuing education days for priests would be on young adult ministry, how to help the priests reach young adults. As it came to our secretariat was, all right, what does that mean if young adults are a priority? And so basically what that means is, all right, we have a director of adult faith formation. Well, when we're doing adult faith formation, any kind of activity, young adults are the priority among adults all adults that are being invited to this event. When we talk about Hispanic ministry has a priority for reaching young adult Hispanics. Marriage and family, reaching young families, really paying attention to, all right, that we already had marriage preparation, but all right, walking with married couples those first 5 years of marriage. So in a sense, that was no more ministry staff for young adult ministry, but now everyone to some extent has become a young adult minister with no additional financial cost. And then we also have some projects, like we're pushing Alpha in our diocese. So when we're pushing out Alpha, it's, all right, we'll help parish run Alpha. We're putting on some Alphas, but our priority is reaching young adults in Alpha. So this is really filtering throughout everything so that young adult ministry is no longer the silo off to the side that may or may not get airtime or may or may not be paid attention to. And then this is also now filtering down into our parishes. So the way we approach parishes in talking about young adult ministry is kind of a two-pronged approach. The first is once we kind of help them understand that the majority of young adults aren't coming to their parish, that they need to go out. The thought is, well, we should be going out to everyone anyway. Our parishes need to become evangelizing parishes that go fishing, as Patrick talked about. And so, but as they go fishing, as they become an evangelizing parish, keep young adults as a priority. So whatever they're doing, if they're putting on Alpha, if they're putting on a retreat, whatever they're doing to reach parishioners, make young adults a priority among that. So again, this doesn't require them hiring any more staff, doesn't require hiring a young adult minister. It just requires them to keep young adults in the forefront. And what would be best is to then have young adults helping in the planning teams of all this so that they know how to reach young adults and are sure to involve young adults. So that's kind of like one prong that we're approaching parishes with. And then the other implementation for parishes is, and I'll kind of reference paragraph 96 in the document where it talks about not only the need for accompaniment by formators, but also accompaniment by peers. And so we still recommend that they form a peer community of people to walk with each other on this journey of faith and to be reaching out to their own peers. So that is a second one, but for like a really small parish with no staff that just thinks starting a young adult group, they think of it as a young adult group, but just starting a young adult community is just overwhelming. Well, no matter what the size of parish, you can at least, whatever you're doing to evangelize your parish, put young adults as a priority. So we thought that kind of scaled and was able to meet all of our parishes wherever they were, whatever their size was, whatever their parish staff was. So that's kind of like the reimagining what diocesan ministry and what parish ministry can look like, because then every parish minister becomes a young adult minister because they're putting young adults at the priority. The second kind of internal thing that we've already started is when I talk with young adults, one of the things that often comes up is vocation, which is one of the focuses of the Synod. But often, almost always, when someone comes to me to talk about vocation, they're talking about state in life vocation. What they're calling is what state of life. But one of the great things about this final document and kind of throughout the entire Synod process is that Pope Francis has really focused on vocation being very broad. In fact, in paragraph 84 of this final document, it talks about is that really our primary vocation is our baptismal vocation. That's what it calls it, which is our call to holiness. And so this is kind of stepping back and saying, wait, like there's this actually more fundamental, greater vocation that we need to include in this. Sometimes I hear people talking about like small v vocation is like career, big V vocation is like, priesthood, religious life. Well, I'd like to think Pope Francis is trying to say, no, big V vocation is our baptismal vocation. Mm-hmm. And all other vocations, all these other decisions that are made have to be oriented to our call to holiness, or they don't really have a place. They're out of place. Mm-hmm. So, and I don't think it was coincidental that Pope Francis followed the Synod preparatory document with a document on the call to holiness in his apostolic exhortation, rejoice and be glad. He's really I see him as really trying to reorient the church to focus on that call to holiness from Vatican II. So the two key ways in which I've already been trying to implement this are one, and this comes from paragraph 62 in the document, is that vocational discernment starts with a relationship with Jesus Christ. And so the document calls it the first condition of vocational discernment. So really that first focus is not going directly to vocational discernment, but going to evangelization first, so that people have that relationship with the Lord and they can hear the Lord, so that then they can listen to what the Lord's direction is for them in their life. So we're really hitting hard that evangelization piece, which I talked about a little bit in part of the reorganization. But this kind of the behind this is, if the church wants more vocational discernment, then we need more evangelization, right? If we want more priests, we need to evangelize more young adults. If we want more religious sisters, we need to evangelize more young adults. If we want more holy marriages, we need to evangelize more young adults. So young adults and the evangelization of young adults is the key and the starting point, that first condition that the document talks about. Then the second key thing is, and this is from paragraph 90 in the document, where it talks about the concept of singles. And this was mentioned by Brenda in the previous webinar we had on this document. So the final document in the Synod in general is reframing this concept of singles in light of this baptismal vocation as being the primary vocation. So often when I talk to singles, and I'll point out I am a single too, so I'm in this same category, that when vocation is understood solely or primarily as state in life, then it seems like if someone is single, they're vocationless. Like they don't have a vocation, they're in limbo. They're kind of trying to figure out what is their vocation. Like they don't have one. They often wish that they did. Until they're a priest, religious, or married, they're just without a vocation. Well, if we step back and really focus with talking to young adults about the baptismal vocation first, that is there, present now, and can be worked on right now. Like no one is vocationless, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone has that same call. In fact, there should be discerning in that call now. If they get married or become a priest, discerning it discerning that call to holiness while they're a priest or religious, or married. If somehow they end up getting divorced or widowed or something, they're still discerning that call to holiness. Like that's why this is that fundamental primary call. Like this doesn't go away. This doesn't change. So this is something that can be worked on right now and pursued in full force. There's no limbo, no waiting around. Just work towards this. And I thought it was beautiful that the document closed in paragraph 165 and 166, coming back around to that and saying what God wants of all of us is to be saints.
Mhm.
right? Whether you're married, priest, religious, that wants us to be saints. That's ultimately what God wants for us. So what I found already as I talk to young adults in this way, especially if they're struggling with state of life discernment, that this is very freeing. In fact, one girl, when I was talking to her, she actually said that this was the first time that someone had talked to her about state of life discernment that was good news to her,
Mm.
which I thought was appropriate words of, the words for the name for the gospel, hearing the gospel being
Right.
proclaimed. So those are the kind of the two pieces I'll throw out there to start things off.
That's wonderful, Sean. Thank you so much for adding that. I'll put my camera on when I talk so I don't sound like someone random in the background. But one of the things that I really heard to make a connection to our first webinar when you brought that up, Sean, is I think it was Jonathan Lewis who was one of the auditors, and he talked, between him and Brianna, they talked about being a synodal church and synodality and what that means. And it sounds like you're reorganizing of the way your offices are working and the way parishes can be working is about being synodal is being community, and so being a family. And so saying, how are we working across ministries rather than offices? I really appreciated that. And especially that no one is vocationless, and that was a really big draw. There are a lot of folks who are young adults who are single and who are hearing a message that, for good or whether it's implicit or explicit, they're hearing a message that says they're waiting on their vocation, and it does, as you said, Sean, and it's coming from. I love that link that you made to the Pope's document Gaudete et Exaltate, because he is, like you said, going back to Vatican II and saying we are all called to holiness. So yeah, we are not vocationless. I like that's our next hashtag after accompaniment is not an email. The next one is no one is vocationless.
No,
So
I'm going to second that, Tracy. I like how I mean, and it's interesting for me, Sean, not being single, having a wife and then even having, kids, 5 kids, is there something really unique in what you said about being able to serve and understand that single life, especially for you, it's a way in which you connected with the initial baptism call. Like, look, my vocation was given to me at baptism, and it continues my entire. I'm not vocationless. I have a vocation as a son or daughter of God. I thought that was awesome. So
yeah.
thank you for that.
Sure. Well, thank the document. It calls the baptismal vocation.
Yeah. Thank the church documents on that one. But yes, thank you, Sean. Diana, let's turn it over to you without further ado. Diana's coming again from Youngstown, Ohio. So welcome, Diana.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be with you. And actually, I'm really grateful to Sean for teeing this up perfectly for me, because his talk about not trying to get rid of the silos in ministry, I know that that's a huge goal for us at our parish here, St. Angela Merici in Youngstown, Ohio. We really we do want to have a peer group, but also we do try to kind of infiltrate and to get into other areas of parish life. And I found that to be really fascinating. We're kind of reaching a point, as Tracy mentioned in my introduction, that I've been at this here for about 3.5 years. And a lot of young adult programs or a lot of young adult ministers don't get that far. So sometimes it's because of other things coming up and things of that nature. And parish work is hard work, and we know that, as is all ministry work. But we're starting to hit some growing pains. As open as our parish is to young adults, as much as we emphasize hospitality, I've noticed that there's in other groups and in some of the older parishioners, there's some frustration because they thought it would look different by now. So this Synod document is providing us with a springboard for further conversation, for further action, for a reminder that young adult ministry and incorporating young adults into the life of the parish is not an arrival. There's not going to be some sort of huge celebration once we hit a certain quota or something along those lines. There is just a constant work. There's a constant checking of ourselves. A need to kind of go back and forth a little bit about what we're doing and how we can improve and who we're not reaching. It's an ongoing, oftentimes difficult process that it's hard when we don't get a lot of feedback too. But we keep going, we keep trying. And the one thing that I really appreciated about the document is that it acknowledged the difficulties that we're facing in current parish structure and current parish life that's contributing to making this very difficult. It talks about, in paragraph 18, it acknowledges that many of the parishes in urban areas, kind of keep a low profile. Maybe they blend in for a variety of reasons. And oftentimes in larger cities too, I hear a lot about competing groups, other apostolates, different things that are coming into town that can help serve young adults, and that's wonderful. And we need them, and that's a really great part of our church. And thank God for that diversity, and thank God for so many people answering the call. But oftentimes in more suburban and rural areas, options are very limited for anything other than parish. So there needs to be a change in approach in terms of how we can best equip people to just automatically give that preferential option for the young person, give that preferential option for young adult ministry, as Sean was talking about, just naturally kind of folding it in and incorporating it into the life of other parish offices and other parish groups. It also talks about that in paragraph 129, the document mentions that the parish needs to be rethought pastorally, in terms of ecclesial co-responsibility and missionary vigor. And certainly, that's very true. We are stretched so thin, and there's so many things that happen as parish life changes, as staffs are diminishing, and different things come up. It's really difficult to keep up, but certainly we need to do that, and we have to be creative in finding ways of doing that. And, the paragraph also mentions not succeeding in meeting the needs and acknowledging these challenges. And this is absolutely true, and I think this is very important, and it seems like a really tall, if not impossible order, but it's also very important to identify inroads and work to build relationships that create lasting change. We need a game change here, and more resources and availability to help make parish life more workable for young adults and young adult ministry. And I think a lot of these inroads haven't yet been explored. And what's good for young adult ministry and reaching young adults is moving from, and I think Nick Stein talked about this in our last webinar, is moving from the sense of recruitment to moving to a sense of relationship. And I think that not only works for us in reaching young adults where they are, but that's also the best approach for gaining support for young adult ministry and causing a little bit of disruption in the parish community as well. Where can we build relationships instead of just recruiting people to be on board and say, yes, I love the idea of young adult ministry, but how do we build those relationships to really make this something that's lasting? And I found in my work that oftentimes when I am met with resistance or some hesitancy about young adult ministry, a lot of times it's simply a lack of knowledge about what's happening with young people, a misunderstanding of what we're hoping to accomplish, and a lot of the kind of unwelcoming and closed off behavior is a huge fear of change. I think that many existing groups in the parish, they fear that we're just going to come in and take over and overthrow absolutely everything. And I don't know, maybe, but probably not. I think we would like to work together and to find a way to be church together. I think that's really kind of the most important thing. So ways of having conversations to put people at ease, I think, is really important. And that's also an element of my job as a parish minister that I don't always get to talk about. It's serving as a liaison to the rest of the parish. It's not serving just young people, and that's very important. That's a huge part of my job. But it's offering opportunities for relationship and for connection to the rest of the parish community. And I often have to serve as that bridge builder. Because both of us, if we're being completely honest, both the young and the old of the parish have misconceptions about each other. And the ultimate disruptor is tearing down of stereotypes. And it's an ongoing process, and it's messy. And some people in groups are more open than others, but it's necessary to be persistent and, to continue to work on these relationships and to keep going. So I think that's sometimes an ongoing issue that we don't always think about, and that, this is going to keep going. And it's not some sort of a rival, but that we have to keep at it. I think also something that I really want to address in this as we continue to talk about the Synod and the document and all of these wonderful things moving forward. And I keep running into this at different points, so I think it's probably worth mentioning. I don't think everybody knows about the Synod, or that the work of the Synod is still very much in the beginning stages, and that it's very much alive. I was just at another parish in my diocese over the weekend sharing about young adult ministry, and there were about 50 people present. And when I asked about the Synod and who was familiar with it, not a single person raised their hand. Mm-hmm. And so I think we have to continue to seek out opportunities to share beyond our normal groups and contacts and promote that the Synod was not just some far off meeting somewhere that happened back in October of last year for a bunch of bishops and important people, but the work really lies very much in our hands. And the question on whether or not if the Synod really did anything also depends on us. So whether it's using the documents for formation in parish groups like pastoral councils, I think we're going to explore that possibility of at least, pulling some parts of it for us to take a look at. Or the parish using conversations from the national dialogue. This work is really just beginning, and we can't assume that everyone knows and understands that they play a critical role in how we move forward for our young people. So that's what I
That was wonderful, Diana. Thank you for those insights, and thank you for bringing up the national dialogue towards the close of that, because I think that could make itself a whole nother webinar as we continue on for that. But I loved what you were saying, about removing the silos, and that also, it's not in a rifle. We're not. And I think, and that, kind of goes, I remember from what Brenda, and I just looked at the list, and hi, Brenda, it looks like she's on today. And so I think it was Brenda or Nick, but I think it was Brenda that said last week that, it's going out, it's accompaniment, and it's listening, and it's reformulating programs, reaching the needs of whatever you're hearing after you're listening, going out towards the needs, providing, resources to young adults, and then listening again. And that was exactly what you were saying, Diana. It's not an arrival. It's not. There's no quota to hit. So I deeply appreciate that.
Yeah.
We're gonna.
I echo that, Tracy, as well. One of the things that we have already experienced is, so the pastors were made aware at one of the priest convocations that we would be reaching out to gather young adults from their parish. We wanted one delegate from the parish. And so I had some colleagues that contacted me that were part of our first young adult task force almost 4 years ago. And they said, they contacted me and they said, okay, let me get this straight. Our first task force wasn't good enough. So now we're going to do another one. And then in addition to that, all the surveys and the pre-synodal documents that we did last summer, where we went out and we listened to all these different young adults and had town hall sessions, so that, as they put in quotations, so that Pope Francis could hear us. That wasn't good enough. Now you want to do something else. And it's like, it's trying to break the mindset a little bit and saying like, no, it was good enough. Like all of that had a role, but now we're at a point where we want to really implement things based upon what you said, and based upon that comes not just from, San Diego and then works its way up and then comes all the way back down, but literally that is uniquely San Diego, and it's modeled within the structure of the greater church. And I think we forget that, we lose sight of that. And so it's funny that you had young adults that were like, what is the Synod? What's the national dialogue? What are these things? For us, it becomes so much of what we like think, breathe, eat, sleep,
Yeah, that's a very good point.
One of the questions that popped up during your discussion very much centered around, like, we're talking about like advocating that, and I think all of you said it in a way, that this isn't just the ministry for young adult ministries or young adult ministers, and that we're called for all of the, like, all the ministries of a diocese, all the ministries of a parish should kind of have young adults as its core. So what's the pitch? Like how, and maybe Sean, maybe you would have a good insight, because your bishop really kind of helped to kind of craft that culture in your diocese, and Patrick, I would assume yours as well, that all ministries have a connection to young adults. But what's the hook? Like, what's the hook for pastors? What's the hook for DREs in a parish? What's the hook for diocesan directors of family ministry, for them to see it and not just be lip service like, oh yeah, young people are important, but rather, what's the strategy for really getting others on board with that vision? Have you had any experience with it? Do you have any war stories to tell of when it worked and when it didn't work? What is the way to communicate that without sounding like a broken record?
Yes, I'll start by, first off, we have not yet created, I would say, a culture of this. We are still in the process of trying to create a culture of this. So of course there are some pastors, some parishes that will be right away, like they get it. Like, yeah, like they see, especially some of the younger pastors who really know, like among their friends, that they grew up with in the Catholic schools, whatever, they're not practicing Catholics, they're not coming to church, they're not around. So some of them just naturally get it, and then it just becomes how to implement change, because this isn't the way the parish is operating today, and that's very tough. That's really tough. The theme of this is disrupting ministry. It's not just seen as change, it's seen as disruption. Like it's like as a negative that there's changes taking place, even though they know the goal is a positive one.
Diana, you had something too.
Yeah, I completely echo that most people understand that that something needs to be done, and whether it's a personal experience of having a child or having a family member fall away from the faith, or seeing kind of numbers drop as in the parish community, we see that quite a bit. I don't find resistance in that. Yes, we need to do something for young people. We need to do something for young people. The bigger questions come when we get to the how. And when you're moving from that sense of recruitment, well, why can't they just do what we do? Why can't they just come in and just do what we say? But really fostering that sense of relationship really does seem to be the biggest challenge. And it's why do we have to kind of bend over backward for them and build these relationships? The generational differences I find are kind of the bigger hurdles to overcome, and the bigger questions that come up. And I think everybody agrees that we need to reach young people. It's just a matter of how.
You know, my wife and I, during Lent, we have like a traveling caravan with our 5 kids, and we go to different parishes that have soup suppers, because one, it's cheap and free, and also 2, it's a great way for us to get to know people in the community. And so last night, being Ash Wednesday, we went to one. It was the only thing we had to do was bring bread, and all these ministries in the social center of the parish had all these different soups out. So we got there, and as I was walking around, a lady asked me, and I could hear her kind of talking about this young family, and we invited our young adult admin, and then a couple of young adult coordinators came too. It was kind of like a soup mob, like flash mob, like let's go to this parish and strongly represent. And so someone said, oh, well, I recognize him. He was on the video with the diocese, our annual Catholic Appeal video. And so she walked up and she said, who are you? Like, what do you do? Do you work in youth ministry? Do you work in, what do you do? And I said, oh, actually, I work for the diocese. I work for the bishop's office. I tried to explain. And this was an older woman with a bunch of the other seniors who had helped put this together. And she goes, wait, you work for the church and you do young adult ministry? And I said, yes, through the bishop's office. I was trying to get her to see it. And she goes, but you're also normal. Like, what is, like, you're also normal.
Wow.
And it shocked me. It made me laugh for a second, but it also really shocked me, because that's the reality. I think that's really what we're working at. For San Diego, it's really just saying, like, you can live a life of within the confines and the beautiful church of the structures of the church, if you want to call it confines. I think Chesterton said it's like a playground with walls, but once you get inside of it, you don't want to leave. It's a joy. You can live a joyful life as a young adult, whether you're a single young adult that like my admin, whether you're a young professional who does volunteer young adult ministry, whether you have kids and you're married, and whatever it is, if you're a young adult, you can live a joy-filled life. And so for us, the biggest strategy for us is communicating and witnessing that joy with the pastors we meet with the DREs, with the faith formation coordinators, with the youth ministers, because so much of the other ministries can be life-sucking and can take the joy away from you. But when we go out, we want people to see the joy that exists uniquely within young adults that are captivated and commissioned within the life of the church. And so for us, that's kind of the way that we do it. As far as strategies, well, I talked a lot about that earlier, and we're still figuring all those out. There's no really one single silver bullet, as we talked about before, but I like to think that one of the most prominent signs of a good Catholic is joy, and that's what we try to communicate.
If I might, one of the things that you made mention of it in the next question that came through actually focused on the pastors in particular, and I would imagine that in a way they kind of represent the pastors are, I hate to use the word, but gatekeepers of sorts, that, with our communities, what the pastor says goes. So have you found it, have you found anything more effective with the pastors? I mean, you're mentioning a number about like the lay people in the community and what's in their best interest and things like that. What specifically for the pastors? The pastors of our parishes, is there anything distinct that you would need to engage them? Are there like top 3 things you would engage with a pastor that maybe you wouldn't necessarily with the lay people, or you would do differently? So I'm just curious, especially with the pastors, because they are such a critical component to the success of any implementation, whether it's this synod or any type of work. And maybe I can start with Diana. Would you mind starting, since you work at a parish, so you work with your pastor, and you probably have a good engagement with your pastor since you're there, but maybe, and then if the others through their diocesan work might have some insights as well.
Sure. So with my pastor, I mean, he's the one who brought me on with the intention of building young adult ministry. He really knew and had the vision of that if we were going to get serious about growth, that we had to get serious about young adults. And I think he felt really encouraged that he knew that I would be able to help work on that, but also that we do have a parish that is very strong in its hospitality anyway. So it was kind of a natural fit for us to kind of start this and to move forward with it. It is fascinating, though, when I hear him talk to his brother priests, or when I hear other parishes that do approach us and say, well, we want to know about young adult ministry, we want to know what you're doing. I think a lot of it is there is a strong sense of fear in that they're not certain what they're getting themselves into. They also don't, many pastors, that I've experienced around here don't feel that they have the help to make things happen for young adults. They kind of shortchange themselves and what the role of the rest of the parish staff can really do. And so I think finding ways of flexibility of implementing young adult ministry in its various forms, I think, is probably key to engaging pastors. Maybe perhaps you can't afford to add a young adult minister on your staff, but here's some other options of what could possibly work for you right now, or some other ways that maybe your pastoral council or other ministries in the church can begin to engage with young adults. Also, too, the one thing that I find that's fascinating is another thing that we see a lot too is a lot of pastors don't acknowledge the young adults that are already present. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes they overlook them, or they think that, as Patrick mentioned, that they just have to look weird. I think a lot of times, young adults tend to blend in, and there's some benefit to that, but there's also a lot of loss in that. So asking, pastors to really open up their eyes and to see who's around and what's in what they're doing. I think that acknowledging the young adults who are there in the first place, I think, is a really key step. That was something that we did also here at our parish, but also something that, we definitely encourage. And I've heard my pastor encourage his brother priests to do the same.
Yeah, so I'll chime in next. I guess my approach has been in talking with pastors has kind of been one, address like maybe some negative fears, things that are on the minds of priests, and help show how young adults might help them with those. So, and then the other is the positive things to inspire them to want young adult ministry. Mm-hmm. So kind of some of the concerns are like, if it's a parish with a school, many of the schools really worry about having enough students, making finances work, and maybe the parish itself worried about having the finances work. Well, you look at the data, if you're not reaching young adults, it's only going to get worse from here on out, right? So mm-hmm. it's reach young adults today, or you may have to close your school tomorrow because no one's putting their kids in your school. Mm-hmm. Right? So reaching young adults will help you to, in the future, not have to worry about these things. It's addressing the problem that they're experiencing now. Like, this isn't something for the future. This is something that they're experiencing right now. But then the flip side is just seeing. So this is even a little more difficult. If there is a vibrant young adult community in the area, they will see that vibrant community and see, like, yeah, they want that, right? Mm-hmm. They want young adults who are coming and just involved and volunteering and doing all the things that, if you're evangelizing young adults, you have at a parish. So they also long for those positives too, but they just don't know, how do I get from here to there, or we can't hire a young adult minister, or we can't do this. So that's maybe just the hardest part is having a relationship with them, to be able to walk with them, and having them be open to, I guess, being mentored on how to have a parish reach young adults, because often as the pastor, they're kind of seen as they have all the answers, and they need to kind of feel like they, be seen as having all the answers. But I think that walking with them to get there is critical.
Yeah, I would agree. I think for us, you did a great sort of dovetail into what I was going to say. It's that walking with the pastors and developing a relationship with the pastors so that they understand that you don't have every answer to their parish young adult dilemma or needs. Maybe, we have a lot of parishes here that are still on the kind of fringes of going from a young adult group to not having a young adult group. We have parishes that have paid young adult coordinators that are part-time, full-time, all these different things. But that doesn't mean that those are the exact answer for every single parish. And so for me and for our office, really, when we go out and with pastors, we first spend time getting to understand the parish and the dynamic of the parish. And then also we recognize really quickly where the parish already has strengths. Sean, you talked really in the beginning, you were talking about that sort of the really investing in walking with married couples that have been married for the first 5 years, right? So there are a lot of parishes that are outside of, say, the more central San Diego area that are in the sort of suburban areas. And there's a lot of recently young married couples that have moved from heavily young adult invested areas to these areas now that are just sort of I don't want to say like the 9 to 5 place, but you commute into one place, you come home, your house looks very similar to every other house next to you. You go to the same church, the same parish, and then your kids go to the elementary school there at the church or whatever it is. And it's like, it just becomes so robotic and monotonous. And so for us, it's within those parishes, well, then we work with the pastors to help identify what the married couples might need or how exactly we can benefit. And 9 times out of 10, they don't need someone paid to do young adult married ministry. They need someone who's available, who's a volunteer, or they need 2 or 3 young couples that can jump in and say, hey, like, I want to be a part of something. How do I help? And so really for us in the Diocese of San Diego, it's getting to know the pastors, knowing what their needs are as a parish, and then reaching into our own sort of prayer life and letting the Holy Spirit do the rest as we support them. There's always voicemails and phone calls and text messages and emails that I'm following up on that are pastors and young adult coordinators that are stuck and they just want some sort of assistance or help. And they wouldn't be calling us if we hadn't first endeared ourselves to them.
I think, Patrick, you made a really good connection to all 3 of you, very, very good connections. But I heard between Patrick and Diana's comments earlier about identifying young adults. Sometimes you think, oh, I need a paid young adult minister and I can't afford one. We don't have the resources for it. So then we don't have young adult ministry. Like that somehow becomes the logic. And again, from what you were saying, Sean, it's like this maintenance mission, maintenance to mission mode. And that also brings back that call to holiness and to proclaim with joy. When we're in maintenance mode and we're so worried about a parish shutting down or not having resources to reach out to young adults, we forget there are resources in the diocese, and it's very easy to forget that there are resources in your parish that, and Diane, you were saying before, and you've said it differently before, but it's, who are you talking to? Who have you been talking to? What young adults have you spoken to? How can you reassess? And if you can't name young adults in your parish first, how can you know whether they would be willing to fill in and help out in any way, or have a burning desire to do so? And some of them may. They just have never been asked and never been identified for their gifts. So yeah, that was some really wonderful connections I heard from the entire webinar series there. We have about 5 minutes left, and if anybody has any more questions, feel free to type them in the chat bar, and we'll see if we can try and answer them in a short amount of time. But otherwise, I want to turn it back over to each one of you for just a minute or so, and Paul as well, feel free to chime in. Any last final thoughts here? We had a lot of questions that were, regarding, how to go to the pastors, how to, what would be like one tip to say, how to make yourself young adult friendly, and really great insights from each one of you. So if you have any final questions, your final thoughts, feel free to add those.
You know, Tracy, I really appreciated just what you mentioned about you know, kind of identifying, you know, your young adults and engaging their gifts. And that's the one thing that I've noticed also that's been a struggle is I think a lot of places, a lot of parishes, they don't know what to do with young adults. A lot of times they think that if there is a young adult group, that that's enough, that they could just stay with each other. And be a holding tank until everybody else dies off, or you know there's a spot open, you know, somewhere. And you know we see this with youth ministry too, and I've seen this also with young adult ministry. Is you know we would get called to do cleanup duty, that there would be like a parish dinner or there would be something, and they would automatically want us to do the dishes or to clear off the tables or to do something like that. Thankfully, my pastor put a ban on that, and that's been really great for us because then it showed us that that you know even though we're young, that we still have many gifts to offer, and we are the church of now. We are the church of the present, and we have a place at the table of leadership, at a place in the liturgies. All of those things. So I think that that's, you know, really important to kind of keep in mind that, you know, it's not just, you know, a young adult group to be a holding tank, but certainly, we know we need to be kind of incorporated now. And also, I think, you know, the one thing that I wanted to say too was that I was really struck in the title of this about the word disruption. And I think that disruptions can be temporary. They can be, you know, pointless nuisance. More than anything else, if there's not action steps or something more in depth to them. So if we really want to disrupt how ministry is done, we need a focus, we need a game plan, and you know, we really have to build those relationships to help make that change and make it a lasting disruption and not just, you know, clanging of gongs and a bunch of noise. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, disrupting ministry. Is it a disruption? And what are the steps after it? Yeah. What do we need to change in our ministries? Wonderful. Sean and Patrick, any final thoughts?
Sure. I guess a lot of what I'm thinking of, like the change, those steps going forward, and they're difficult ones. Like one is our church, you know, our parishes becoming outward looking, evangelization, that mission focus versus maintenance, which Tracy, you mentioned before, which just, at least from what I see, most of our parishes are mission or are maintenance focused, and that change from maintenance to mission is a very difficult one. But somehow that has to happen, especially to reach young adults, since most young adults are not coming to the church, our parishes need to go out to them. So that is just critical, but difficult. And then the other is a kind of a paradigm shift in viewing and understanding what ministry is, which we've touched on already, and that it's not about putting on events as the primary focus, but it's reaching people and walking and moving people along in their faith. And this requires not just investment in putting on an activity, but an investment in developing long-term relationships with people, which is much more difficult and time-consuming and everything. And so that's where, like, that shift has to happen in order to enable all of this. Like, I see it like those two things as being like the linchpins. If we can't do those two things, then reaching young adults, no matter what documents, no matter what action steps that come from our bishops, it's not going to actually meet the people on the ground. It's not going to happen. It's not going to come to fruition.
Yeah, no, I'm going to agree with that wholeheartedly. You know, behind me, there's a dry erase board over there, kind of in the distance right there in the corner. And every year, just until the budgets, so we're working on our budgets now. Some of you all might be doing the same thing. As we're beginning the budgets, we pull up our dry erase board and we do this thing where we go through and we mark off all the things we've accomplished. Now it has like the events we're doing, it has the things we want to do, it has the upcoming gatherings or travel. It has basically all the things that keep us outside of the office itself, or things that are done for the sake of the laity and the young adults that we serve on a larger scale. But what it doesn't really show is it doesn't show that intentional one-on-one meetings and the discipleship and mentorship that happens, where we really try and commission young adults to go out. And so as I was going through this with my associate director, Pamela Poe, we were talking about all these things. And I said, this year, we have 27 events we're doing from last year until, July 1. I said, this year, I want to go down about half of those. And she thought at first it was because she'd recently just had a baby. She just returned from maternity leave. But in reality, it wasn't that. What it really comes down to is, as we've begun to do more and more events and develop leaders, we're recognizing how much less we are needed at the things that we do. And we're really hoping that now we've reached a point where we can use our leaders who have been commissioned, who have been invested and cultivated in relationship with each other, but also with the gospel and with Christ. And we're hoping that they can then go out and they can do their own, whether it's theology on taps, they can do their women's ministry outreaches, whether it's about discernment or vocation. Because if it's all dependent upon us, well then, what happens when we leave? Or what happens if the young adult office goes a different direction in 5, 6 years or 2 years? It could all change. So for us, it really comes back to just getting to the heart of what the gospel truly is, and it's the sharing and witnessing of Christ and bringing that light into someone and then letting them go out and do the same. And so for us, that's the final message I would say is all this stuff, all these programmings, like, I had my notes of all of our upcoming Synod, all these things, they're great. But at the end of the day, they're not going to be effective or mean anything if we don't actually go out and teach teachers.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
That's wonderful. That is a wonderful way to sort of close. It makes me think that even at a big event, you might not necessarily know anybody's name. And so events can be wonderful, but have you touched the lives of everyone that's there? That probably has to come first, and that's what I'm hearing from a lot of you. So that was really wonderful. And Gabriella says, "Amen, Patrick." Thank you, Gabriella. We are going. Let me just give a few quick announcements. I want to let everybody know who's on our call today. To join us for our next webinar. Hopefully you have been hearing us talk about the papal exhortation that is coming out on the Synod on Young People very soon. I want to say, you guys know better than I do, is it the 25th of this month or 24th?
Yep, 25th, March 25th.
Okay, that's what I thought it was. So we are going to host our next webinar April 4th, same time, same channel. And then I also want to make sure that everybody that is on our call today knows that they can subscribe to Paul Jarzembowski's newsletter that's coming out of his office from the Secretariat of Lady, Marriage and Family Life on Youth and Young Adults. And so he put the link there. If you scroll up in your chat bar, he put the link to register, and I will be sure, actually I'm going to copy that right now. I'm going to be sure to add that when I send out the link to the recording to everybody. I'll put this link in there too, because the recordings are linked to the newsletter. Any updates we have about the National Dialogue, any highlights from World Youth Day, everything that has to do with young adult ministry will be, in resources for young adult ministry is in this newsletter each month. So be sure to subscribe to that. And I encourage you all to do that. So I want to thank you all again, for joining us. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Diana. Paul had to drop off. He's got a meeting right now. But thank you all so much from the bottom of my heart. This was really wonderful.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you. Thanks, Tracy.
Thank you, guys, and we'll see you all soon.
Bye.
All right, God bless. Bye.
Bye.